Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA Podcast. I am Sherrod Blakely, joined by my CLNS colleague, Bobby Manning. What's going on, Bobby?
What's going on, Sherrod? Interesting
Oh,
times for the
man.
Celtics. We're
It
like
is.
13 games in, and we still don't know who this team is, really.
And the scariest part about that, Bobby, is I don't think this team knows who this team is. It's one thing for us to be in the dark, for them to be still kind of in the dark. A little scary, before we get into the thick of things, I just want to let folks know that this is, again, the Big Three NBA Podcast, and we are part of the CLNS Media Network family. And of course, we couldn't do what we do here if it wasn't for great partners like our good friends at Prize Picks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. We are going to begin on a happy note because the Celtics are coming off a win, which has not happened nearly as often as they would like. Big time beatdown of the Ja Morantless Memphis Grizzlies, 131-95. And as we've seen, Bobby, and you've seen them close, there's been this pattern of win one, lose one, win one, lose one. It's been like that the last 5 games for the Celtics, alternating wins with losses. What does this team have to do, Bobby, from your perspective, to just get a little bit more consistency in terms of racking up and stacking up wins?
Probably shoot better. That's the big thing, right? They're bottom 5 in three-point shooting to begin this year. Half the team, maybe more, is slumping from outside. And I think they're probably in the process of figuring out where their shots are going to come from this year. Because even Joe, as three-point centric as his system has been, came into this year saying, yeah, we might have different shots from different places on the floor, given the personnel we have this year. Specifically talking about the lack of pick and pop bigs, because that was a big part of the Porzingis and Horford and other player minutes that they had in past seasons here. So they've been so far the top 3-point shooting team in terms of attempts. But they've also, thanks to Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard, moved up into the top 5, 10 in mid-range attempts per game. And those two have been super efficient from that area. And Jaylen at practice today, a big part of his discussion was the fact that they just need to be able to find shots from anywhere this year. He's been discouraged in the past from taking mid-rangers, but this year he feels like he needs to do it for a number of reasons. And Pritchard also, as his three-point has betrayed him to begin this year, also stepped in close to the basket at 10-15 range and has been lethal there. He's probably been one of the better mid-range shooters in the sport to begin this season. So I think figuring out where those shots are coming from and where they're best suited to be taking attempts on the floor is going to be a big part of their offense stabilizing. It's still been a top 10 to 15 offense to begin this year, which I think, given the circumstances, is suitable, along with their top 10 to 15 defense. But they just need to be a little bit more consistent with that on the offensive end, particularly in crunch time, which is where they've lost a lot of these games. And as we record this, Sherrod, no team in the NBA is further below what their record should be. They're 2 wins below what their record should be compared to what they've done efficiency-wise to begin this year. So even though they're 6 and 7, the numbers say that they should be 8 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big difference right now, what they've been versus what they've produced in terms of efficiency.
Well, when you look at those numbers, Bobby, what do you think has been the reason for them falling short of that where they should be in terms of wins and losses relative to their efficiency? I mean, are there 1 or 2 things that you can look at and just say that those are probably some of the key culprits as to why they are where they are record wise?
It's the crunch time. I mean, you can rattle them off, right? Opening night, they got the last shot against Philly, 2 shots for Pritchard that he misses. Utah, they got to get a defensive rebound. Nurkic gets the putback, and they lose that game. I can just go through all the examples right now. Detroit, all those offensive rebounds late in
Yeah.
that game. They've struggled in a number of areas late in these games, and Joe pushes back on that a little bit. He says crunch time's a crapshoot for everybody. And that even the end of the second quarter, the end of the third quarter, those are just as important. And I don't totally agree with that, but I will say the most recent Philly game, the third of the three that they've played, they lose by 2, and Quentin Grimes hit a half-court heave at the end of, I believe, the second or the third. So that did end up being the difference in the game, not defending that shot and stopping them from doing that. There's a lot of factors that go into winning and losing close games, obviously, but I do think when they've had a number of situations this year where they've had the final shot and they've botched it, that game in particular with Derek at the end, the Peyton situation on opening night, they gotta get better in those final shot situations, or at least run enough good sets down the stretch of these games to not be in that position. Easier said than done when you're not going to create a lot of separation this year, right? You're not
Mhm.
miles ahead of teams like you have been in the past where you can avoid those close game situations. You're going to be in them a lot. And if you do get to the end of the year and let's say they've blown 7 to 10 games that they could have had, that's going to be the difference between you potentially being that 6 seed surprise some of us thought they'd be coming into this year and the non-playoff team some people thought they'd be coming into this year. It's easy to see that being the deciding factor in their final record.
Yeah, and when you talk about the just the crunch factor with the Celtics, and again we're talking about Bobby Manning, CLNS insider for CLNS Media, covers the Celtics. Does a great job. We're talking about just crunch time part of the game, and if you look at this team on paper, it in theory should be Jalen time. And you would think that a lot of what they're trying to do is to make sure the ball is in his hands so that he's making decisions. And you tell me if you disagree with this, but I don't feel as though that's emphasized enough when they are in those late game crunch time situations that they make it an absolutely come hell or high water. We're going to get the ball in Jalen Brown's hands. Whereas it feels like if we do, great. And if we don't, we don't. I mean, you tell me, how do you see that?
Yeah, we were debating it on the post-game show that night after the Philly game. Why not call a timeout to set up what you're looking for in that position? Because the ball doesn't end up in Jalen's hands, even though after they all admitted that was what the plan was going into that possession. So White ends up with it, loses the ball against Drummond, foul maybe in that spot, but they didn't have the play that they wanted to run set up. And there was a clear opportunity there to stop it, reset it, and go back to what you were trying to do or change it in that situation. Instead, they just ran this frenetic set. He throws up the ball. Kate almost put it back. And clearly, they did not get what they wanted out of that possession. Opening night, tougher for me to remember, but another situation on 2 straight shots where you probably wanted the ball in Jalen's hands, and it ends up in Pritchard's for 2 rough shots in that situation, down one. So this is something I feel like Joe has struggled a little bit throughout his
Mhm.
tenure here. Is you can just run back the memory of numerous Tatum heaves, tough shots, uh, basic isolation possessions in that spot. And, it's a lot of the stuff we always talk about with Joe. Would you rather just get a shot off rather than turn it over, trying to run something crazy, with guys cutting and passes left and right and all that stuff? Or do you just want to get a shot off? And if it goes in, great. Maybe there's enough time on the clock to get an offensive rebound in that situation. There was in that Philly game in that spot. But if we're looking at the clutch numbers for the team this year in terms of who's taking the shots, who's been efficient in that spot, who hasn't. On the whole this season, they've actually run the offense more through Derek, Peyton, and those guys have done exceptional with the ball control, even though they haven't shot well to begin this year. So I don't think anyone has any problem with that being the case to begin this year. But in crunch time, 2 shots a game for Jalen, 54% from the field. He's been efficient in those situations. Derek, 30% in those spots, point 0.1 assists, and no turnovers, which is great. Same with Pritchard. So those guys haven't been giving the ball away in those situations. But White's 30 from the field in crunch time. Pritchard's 43. Jalen's 54. I know it's a small snapshot. It's 7 games and however many minutes that is, probably like half of that. But this is something that they have to work on clearly, and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of practice time, right? So you're not getting to run and execute those situations in controlled environments. They just have to keep doing it, and it's probably going to keep happening for them that they end up in those situations. So hopefully over the course of the season, you get better at it. You figure out what you want to do in those situations. Because honestly, Sherrod, that's probably where they miss Tatum the most, right? If we're stacking
Mhm.
up all the things they miss about him, is just being able to give him the ball, say, go do something here, and him actually being, one of the more efficient crunch time players in the league, last shot guys. was a big benefit for them. Now they don't have that option, so they have to do it by committee. But I do think there's a strong argument to having Jalen handle the bulk of those responsibilities.
Yeah, and I guess for me, that's really what's been the big surprise is that he's not. I mean, I would think that if let's say you did not have Jalen Brown around and you didn't have Tatum, then yeah, it becomes more of a crapshoot because you literally have no idea who should be the one kind of driving that train in that moment. But Jalen is your best player right now, and typically your best player has the ball in their hands down the stretch in those clutch type situations, and it just feels as though it's something the Celtics want to do, but it doesn't feel as though it's something that they feel they absolutely have to do. There doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency to get it done the way there seems to be when Jason Tatum is in that role. And again, I just find that fascinating this year when there's so many holes that they're looking to have filled. When you talk about Tatum not being there, you talk about no Drew and no Porzingis and all those guys, and Jalen's like, I am all NBA. I'm a pretty good player, and it feels as though there's still a reluctance to go all in on him being the guy in those clutch situations, which is surprising to me.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a decision they make because clearly they're drawing up these plays for him, right? They're trying to get on the ball, but they just haven't been able to. And some of that's, I'm sure, on the coaches. Some of it's on the players executing it. These are guys who have never been in crunch time by and large in their careers. And it's probably the biggest adjustment or acclimation that they have to go through is those possessions where things really tighten up, where they're locking down on everything defenses, especially the final shot of the game where everything's being done to blow up a play. And can you react? Can you adjust? Can you do something on the fly to make the best of that possession if you're not getting a timeout in or you're not able to stop the play? I thought Derek actually did a pretty good job trying to get something off on that shot in Philly. And then
Mhm.
Kata had a great look at being able to put that in at the
Yeah.
basket to tie the game there. The bench actually thought that he did. He was that close. So that's the good reactions on the fly by a guy like Kata, by other guys on the floor like Derek to just make something happen in that situation. But they're gonna have to get it done there at some point, and they have in a couple now. They have 2 wins in the clutch. They've been able to blow out a handful of teams too now, which is nice. I didn't know if they'd be able to do that, and they've now done it to Cleveland, Washington, as well as Memphis now. So they've won in a couple different ways. As we've mentioned, they have a worse record than they probably should right now, and that probably makes you feel better if you're them. In fact, Joe said as such this week at practice that feels good that we've played better than we've actually been in our record. But if that trend continues throughout the season, you do start to look at this and say, man, they've left a lot of wins on the table, and this season could have been better than it ends up being. Depending on what you want out of this year, right, Sherrod? Because a lot of fans want to see
Right.
them tank.
Yeah.
Maybe their best case scenario for people who feel that way is see these guys play well, see the strides by the young players throughout the course of the game, and then just blow it at the end so you get the loss and you're in the lottery. Like, if that's how you feel, that's probably your ideal outcome if you're a fan like that.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at a team like, for example, the Dallas Mavericks last year, where they were by far they were not the worst team in the NBA, and yet there they lo and behold, they wound up with the number one overall pick, and it can happen for sure. We are with Bobby Manning, and just a reminder, this is the Big Three NBA podcast, part of the CLNS Media Network, which is where you'll find the Big Three NBA podcasts, past and present episodes, as well as other great Celtics content. Bobby, I wanted us to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about this. Second unit that is constantly in a state of influx because guys are in the starting lineup and then they're back to the bench and there's a lot of rotating there. But it seems that they're starting to get a certain consistency or at least relatively consistency out of a couple of key guys off of that bench. And I'm thinking of folks like Luca Garza, who seems to kind of start finding his way. Sam Hauser, we know what he can do. Hasn't had the greatest season, but we know what Sam can do. And Anthony Simons has really been that bucket getter that we knew him to be in Portland. What's your take on this bench unit, Bobby? Because it seems that when this Celtics team does well, they stand out in a big way. And obviously when they struggle, not so much.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little better about them over the last week here. And I looked at the numbers because it felt like that Simons, Hauser, Garza rotation, the first one that comes in off the bench in the first quarter, was a problem. They hadn't played great through the beginning stretches of the season, and there was a week or two where the starters were putting up amazing numbers and the bench was the reason that they were losing those games because those minutes were so bad. But it did get to a point over the last week here, thanks to Simons coming around. You mentioned Garza's couple good games we've seen, and Hauser finding his footing with that unit, where they got to be a +5 for the season, that 3 in particular, lineups including those 3. I'm sure that they've staggered in White and Brown and some other guys to make those lineups work too. So that's what they're gonna have to do, mix and match a little bit. Uh, the question we've had all season is whether stacking the starting group and just leaving Simons and whoever off the bench is a sustainable way to have winning rotations throughout games, and they've done a better job with it of late. So I'm not hugely concerned about that second unit at full strength right there. I like what Garza's given them, whether he's scoring or not, and it's nice to see him start scoring and find himself on putbacks and wherever else he's contributing right now. Not the best defender in the world, but they're making it work with that. Minot looks like he's going to be there for now, so maybe he helps out with the rim protection alongside him. I thought moving him to the bench was risky because for a lot of the role guys on the team this year, the ones who have played with the starters, Minot included, have been empowered. The ones who go to the bench don't end up doing as much offensively, at least, because there's just not as much offensive creation in those lineups. But later in that Memphis game, even though it was garbage time, even though it was the second half, he did find a way to get a dunk and a three and do a couple other things. So if that ends up working out for him, all the better. We've talked about it. The starting lineup and the bench are probably going to change pretty regularly throughout the season. I had hoped that the Minot thing would stick because we just loved what he was giving in this team in a number of different areas. But his production tailed off. And I think a big reason, Joe, and he talked about it at practice, it wants to see constant change there is the lack of complacency from not knowing who's going to be in there on any given night. Might not even said like he feels like he's has no staying power in that lineup, even though he had been there for 9 straight games. And Jordan, who said he was fighting for his life, even as he started to play pretty regularly there, and now he gets to start. I don't think we're under any uh, impression here that Walsh is going to stay in that starting lineup all year. And any number of guys can move. I think we're still in the stage, Sherrod, where we're discussing the Pritchard Simons thing. I think it's a worthy debate that we're having about which one of those guys should start and which one of those guys should come off the bench here. So I think there's plenty of change to come when it comes to who's starting, who's coming off the bench, mixing and matching throughout games, who's out there at the end of games. I think is going to be a nightly question and has changed. Tillman even has filled in for Kate at some of the end of these games, as much staying power as Kata has had in that starting group. And I found out today talking to Jordan Walsh, because I figured Joe went and told these guys when they're going to start, right? They just see it on the starter sheet that everyone else gets when it comes out. They just look every day before the game, and the 5 starters come out on the piece of paper or on the PowerPoint, whatever they show there, and that's how they find out that they're starting before these games. And obviously, none of them know whether that's going to carry over the next night, outside of White, Brown, and Pritchard. Let's say Kata maybe a little bit too at this point. So that stuff's going to change. And Joe's argued it's a strength. There's some downsides to it too. Obviously, the constant having to figure out what's the best group to put out there in pretty much every situation from starting to finish. But it does keep the coaches on their toes, keeps the opponents on their toes to some degree, I guess, too, and keeps all these guys feeling like they could get involved. And that's where they're at, Sherrod, right? I think out of the 13 guys that they have available, pretty much 12 have been part of this thing outside of Boucher, and even he's snuck into a few games lately. So uh, they've done a nice job getting productivity out of everybody on the roster to this point. And that was something I heard going into this year, not just for them, but for teams around the league. With this new apron, with this new setup where teams aren't going to be as loaded at the top, there's going to be an onus on coaches to get as much energy and hustle and whatever they can get out of any number of guys, even if they're not the most polished players on either end of the floor. Can you get a guy to come off the bench and just play as hard as possible for 5 minutes and have that be part of your 48-minute plan for a night? I think Indiana started doing that last year, and a lot of teams, including the Celtics, are trying to follow suit.
Yeah, and as you know, Bobby, you've seen enough of the league to know that if it's anything, it is indeed a copycat league. If something is
Hmm.
working somewhere else, you're going to try and see if it can work for you. One of the guys that you mentioned, Jordan Walsh, who I mean, you talk about going from is he going to even be on the roster at the start of the season to now he's a starter? It's amazing. And we'll talk a little bit more about him in a few minutes. But first, want to just a few words from our good friends at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win cash. It's the only app that offers you stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more or less on probably the hottest quarterback going in the NFL right now, Drake May. You can pick passing yards, rushing yards, and touchdowns. Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on Prize Picks. You can also follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just someone whose picks you really, really, really like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on Prize Picks. How do you get in? It's real simple. You just download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Well, folks, we are back and we're here with Bobby Manning, CLNS Media. And Bobby, you mentioned Jordan Walsh a little bit earlier, and I want us to take a little bit deeper discussion in Jordan and just really, this is the guy, again, his contract was not guaranteed unless he was on the roster at the start of the season, crossed that bridge. Then he really wasn't playing much. And we looked at the Minot surge, and then it just seemed that he was just going to basically be at the end of the bench. And lo and behold, he got an opportunity to play, did some good things, got another opportunity, and now he's in the starting lineup. What's been the key to his ascension to where he's now among that first five, even if he's not always brought it on the PA announcement when he's in the starting five?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's in a spot I don't think anyone else on this roster is right now, where he went from not playing at all to being a starter, which I don't like. Those are just such two extremes that it's hard to grapple with where he ends up between those two things by the end of the year. I don't know if he'll stay in that starting group. He has a chance to, just because he does bring some of the rim protection, which I didn't expect that Minot did, blocking shots and help positions around the rim because of his length. And certainly the rebounding's been sustainable through his minutes there that Minot was able to help stabilize and when he became a starter. And the shooting, to me, and it's a small sample so far, I think he's like 6 or 17 from three, has been good enough where you probably feel better about him as a three-point shooter than you do Minot, even though Minot was able to get up to like 33%, 32% through his best run there. There's some similar pitfalls with them. They've both fouled a decent amount, which I know the team has as a whole this year. Um, he probably is vulnerable with the skinny frame there. So there's a number of things that you do question whether it'll be sustainable or not staying with that group. But the fact that a player you drafted and spent time developing and were patient with, trying to come around, through some of the development hurdles he had to go through there. The fact that at what's he, 21, now looks
Yeah.
like he's part of the picture at least going into the future. Has another year on the rookie deal next season. Can probably extend them for super cheap if you want to this summer. It's encouraging because they've done this now with a number of players: Hauser, Cornette, Cater, who's become a starter now. They've had guys go through Maine. They've had guys acclimate to their system, sit on the back burner for a little while, learn from the veterans, and then start to work their way into roles. And this is what they need next to Brown and Tatum going into next year: rebounding, defensive, occasional shot making wing. And he has some versatility to his game in terms of pushing the ball in transition.
Right.
Obviously, he's good enough defensively to put him on both a Tyrese Maxey, a Jaren Jackson Jr., as well as Apollo Banchero so far. So I'm not going to overreact to a week or two here, but it's hard not to be encouraged by what we've seen from him, hitting shots with poise, playing consistent minutes, being part of the defensive game plan. And one thing Joe has said about him that Walsh said to me today too is he takes a lot of pride in really knowing the opponent's tendencies, studying them, being ready to guard a number of different players and knowing what they're going to do. That shows in the defensive success he's had to begin this year. And I think only Tillman has held opponents to a lower shooting percentage in their defensive matchups so far this season. And if you look at Jackson, he was 0-5. I think Maxey was like 1 for 9 against him in that game. So some impressive stuff that he's done defensively to start the season and for the team as a whole. Like I've been blown away by how good they've defended, how well they've defended to start this year. I thought that was going to be where they struggled. They've actually been rock solid on that end. It's the offense that's been the question to begin this year. And I think that's what the question is for Walsh, Minot, Kada, any number of these role guys who, yes, are giving them a lot of hustle minutes, a lot of defense, a lot of rebounding intensity. But what are they giving you on the offensive end? That's still what they're trying to figure out with all of these guys.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the Celtics, I believe, as far as scoring defense, I think they're like number 2 or 3 in the league as far as fewest points allowed, things like that. The thing that Jordan has done that I don't, I think he's actually addressed an area of weakness that even when they had this incredibly stacked roster, it was still an area that we recognized. We just kind of glossed over and didn't pay much attention to it. But the Celtics have consistently had problems with super quick guards. Guys that just like Maxey, it was always a problem. It didn't matter whether it was Drew, it didn't matter whether it was Marcus Smart, it didn't matter who. Those fast, quick guards were a problem. And even though Jordan is not, a speed merchant per se, he's shown the ability to use his length to give those speedy guys
And
at
he's
least maybe.
athletic too.
Yeah. He gives them a different kind of challenge that I don't think Boston has had guys at that position in the past couple of years who are great defenders, have been amazing defenders, but that was an area that they weren't necessarily as strong as maybe, let's say, Jordan Walsh has been. So to me, I look at him, I look at Minot as two different types of defenders, but if you were to morph them together in the course of a 48-minute game, you could easily see a scenario where each of those guys defends a certain type of player and gives them that 4, 5, 6 minute burst of solid play defensively, again in certain matchups. But to your point, Bobby, what can they give you at the other end of the floor? Can they just simply knock down open shots? Because I think that's literally what you're looking for right now from anyone not named Jalen, Peyton, Derek White. Can those other guys, can they just knock down wide open shots? Because you got to believe that when Tatum comes back and whoever survives, who's ever still on the roster, you're gonna get even more open looks than the ones you're getting right now.
Yeah, and so far 47 from the field, 44 from three. It's 7 for 16 actually that he's at out there. Only 2 free throws for him so far. So this is an active question about where he fits in best on that end. You hope he's not in the Neesmith situation where you're just
Yeah.
taking a couple shots every game and whether you make them or miss them is deciding whether you're playing or not. It's nice to see this year that that's not necessarily the case for a lot of these guys, and it's given them more freedom probably to shoot more comfortably when they do get those opportunities and play more freely overall, knowing that they're not going to get yanked out of these games necessarily. So nice to see Walsh show some strides. He had the best game of his career over the last week or two here. Kada had the best game of his career a week or two ago. Minot had his as well, I think on the same night. And someone else had theirs too. Like they're just starting to stack those up and down the
Right.
roster for a young team that hasn't gotten to play a lot. Luka Garza, I'd say you can throw into that mix. These are guys who've been waiting their whole careers to have regular roles, and to see them capitalize on those opportunities is encouraging because, again, like we said, you need 1 or 2 of these guys to carry forward into the next Celtics team that's contending when Tatum gets back. And there's a number of options that you could see emerging from that group there to this point. So that's the important thing about this year. Like we said, Sherrod, if they lose all the close games at the end and they end up in the lottery, that might be the best long-term outcome for the season, along with players finding their strides and getting extra opportunity and developing through the course of an up and down year. And we know that's what this is going to be. We've seen it already. Some great wins, some really bad losses. And the schedule is going to lighten up this week here with the Clippers struggling coming in on Sunday and Brooklyn Tuesday and Friday, who are almost automatic wins. And a number of other teams coming up who are vulnerable, along with more off days, which this team hasn't had. I think they played 13 games in 22 days to start this year.
Yeah, and that's Bobby. Actually, that's what we're going to end on talking about this upcoming slate of games where the Celtics. This is the first where you feel comfortable and confident that they can not only find success but get over the 500 mark for the first time this season. When you look at the teams that they have on the schedule, you've got the Clippers as you mentioned, plus the away and home set with Brooklyn. What's the key for them to go into this stretch of games and just handle their business? Because it's not even about playing up to the level of opponent. If both teams play to the level of their ability, at worst, Celtics get 2 out of these 3.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's when I look up at that Brooklyn team, and they have some guys, right? Nick Claxton, Michael Porter Jr. So there's some players you have to watch out for. Cam Thomas is hurt, obviously, so that helps. But when they had 5 first-round picks last year, and when all of them effectively, save for 1 or 2, are playing in the G League on this team that's rebuilding, that should have minutes available for those guys, that's a
Mhm.
crazy thing to see, and it can't make you feel great about those picks if you're them. I know it's early, but you would want those guys playing. Yemen, Igor Yemen, or however you pronounce it, he looks like he's starting to show some stuff there. Again, there's a couple guys you have to watch out for on that team, and they're well coached. So I'm not going to say it's going to be 30-point win from the jump against them. They're competitive to some degree, but they just don't have the personnel that they had, say, at the beginning of last year when they were able to push you to the brink. So you can't just sleepwalk into those games. I don't think this team is in position to do that anymore. A lot of these players are in position to do that, especially with a gap between games. Should be able to win both of those. But as you know, Sherrod, sometimes there's an element of if you play a team twice in a short span, the team that loses the first one is able to figure some stuff out and steal the second one. So we'll see how it goes. The Clippers are going to be tough, right? Harden and Zubats in particular, 2 guys who are going to be tough to contain. I would think they'll throw Jalen, but also a few, the Walsh and Minot of the world at him and try to frustrate him on the ball. Zubac, Kate is just going to have to do the best he can there, but no Kawhi. So Celtics have caught some breaks between Kawhi, Zion being out in that Pelicans game, Ja being out in that Memphis game. And they, knock on wood, have been healthy themselves. So those are the things that are going for them to begin this year, along with the schedule in terms of games played over a certain amount of time, starting to turn their way as well here. So I don't know how you feel, Sherrod, but I'm still in the place where I think this team can exceed expectations this year. It definitely should be like 8-5, as we've talked about right now. That would make you feel better about them finishing with, let's say, 45 plus wins this year. But I think you've seen that they can play well enough to aspire to do that. Where are you at?
Well, I'm curious about this stretch of games they got coming up. It's really I don't know if there has been a 3-game stretch they've had where you felt they should win all 3 games, or they have a
Yep.
very good shot at winning all 3 games without it being this major, upset of proportions or something like that. So I'm curious to see how they are going to handle, basically going into a stretch of games similar to what we've seen Celtics teams in the past couple years.
Closest
Uh,
was Utah and Washington at home, and obviously they blew the Utah one and then won in a blowout in Washington, so could
right.
be similar to that, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the thing that I'm curious to see, like, how does Jordan Walsh handle this stretch of games? Because really, if I've just been thrown into the starting lineup and I'm hitting a stretch of games against teams that aren't great, and I'm in the starting lineup, this is an opportunity for me to almost like build some starting unit credits. Because I'm basically competing against guys and teams that I should have some degree of success against, whether it's scoring, defense, you name it. I should be able to do some things that I should be able to do at a little bit higher level against them than, let's say, Oklahoma City or the Knicks or Orlando. So he's the guy that I'm really paying close attention to during these next 3 games. Is there a guy that you're paying attention to a little bit more closely in this stretch coming up?
Oh, it's a good question. Probably Derek, right? Like, is he going to break out and become the guy that we thought he could be coming into this season? Some of the loftier predictions we had, like All Star, like All NBA. The answer to this point's been no. And, he's top in steals and blocks, at players at his position so far. He's been super consistent in terms of his defensive output. So the shot making hasn't impacted him on that end. Offensively, after a couple good games here, a good second half in the Philly game and a great game against Memphis. does that get him going now? Is he able to break out of that slump he was in to start this year? Because as much as Pritchard was in his head, as he talked about after that last game, and has just missed shots, feels like Derek's getting more defensive attention and actually having to take more difficult shots to begin this year. So is that what the story of this season's going to be for him? That he's less efficient and less impactful offensively because of more attention and a bigger role? Or is he just off to a slow start and it's going to turn around here? That's what I'm going to look to see, especially as the opponents get a little bit easier here over the next handful of games.
Yeah, I'm with you, Bobby. I really want to see him break through because I mean he's a heck of a player.
Mhm.
And you know, he's it's hard to figure out exactly what's not working other than the fact that is it, as you pointed out, is it the fact that he has basically moved up the food chain in terms of status and in terms of attention, or is he just having one of those stretches? And it's hard to tell the difference between the two at this point. So hopefully he will be able to kind of get on track these next few games against again teams that he and the Celtics as a group should have some success against. Before we get out, you about to say something, Bobby?
No, no, all good.
Okay. Before we get out of here, for those of you listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to CLNS Media and Celtics All Access YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Celtics content, as well as a chance to leave a comment that we may talk about on the next episode. And one more thing, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new video drops like this one. And for Bobby Manning, I'm Sherrod Blakely, and this is the Big Three NBA Podcast.